Okay, so I mean, I saw the trailer a bunch, and you see him tripping and being a dork
Hmm.
as Clark Kent. Great, that
Hmm.
works. Do you think
Hmm.
they'll let him? Where does masculinity fit into the meta modern? Is it just hope, or is there still a place for being like, dude, whatever genuinely masculine means? Because I'm downstream of you, so I'm like, I don't know what that means. I have a mustache as a placeholder for once I can figure that out, But I'm like, is there any place for it? Um,
Yeah.
because for me, that's a super duper tough one. It's like you can go super extreme with like Zero Dark 30 or something, but that doesn't feel right,
Mm.
and I'm too cynical to enjoy that. But
Yeah.
maybe what's the flight movie with Tom Cruise?
Oh, it's Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah. And
Totally.
did you make a video on that on how it's meta modern?
I didn't. I weirdly ended up on like a couple of cable news shows talking about it somehow, and it was really
Nice,
a strange experience.
nice.
But yeah, I think it's getting the Top Gun Maverick treatment. I think from even just my read of the trailer, what they'll play upon is, how that plays into like masculinity. Well, that's a tough question, but I think what they will play upon is, can we have a painfully wholesome, relentless commitment to aspiration, to virtues, to the things that we may intrinsically know are good, true, and beautiful in a world that still is deeply suspicious of that.
Hmm.
Now,
Yeah. Well,
when you get to questions of masculinity, that's, I don't know. Give me your thought first, and
well, I'm
I
I'm
need to.
thinking masculinity is so hard because when we abstract it out from virtue, it's like, well, what's left? What does it mean to be masculine if we don't have
Mhm.
virtue in
Yeah.
mind as well? And so I think classic Superman, it's like you don't get any more masculine than that. He's got a giant jaw. He's cut, super jacked. Like he can do whatever he wants physically, and that's kind of part of the downfall. Is like there's such an emphasis on power that you're like, oh man, if you we think power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So how is Superman exempt from being corrupted by power? So now we have these other dark versions. But
Yeah.
if you think about like classic Superman, that's what a man should be. He didn't after Siegel and Schuster, he didn't kill anymore. He's not punching through anyone's face. He's always holding back. He's always being reserved. And that was kind of in my head, that was the kind of the classic view of masculinity where it's like you could wreck
Mhm.
somebody, but you won't. You're still going to,
Mhm.
have your shirt buttoned up and everything, but you might sock someone if he says something wrong to a woman, but you're not going to
Mhm.
jump on top of him and curb stomp him.
Mhm.
That's not what masculinity is because
Mhm.
masculinity is still true, good, and beautiful. And because Superman's the ultimate masculine man, which is weird because he doesn't even come from here, like Batman should be, but Batman goes a little too hard. And so he's got all these demons he's wrestling with, and he can't even face the world as Bruce Wayne. And so I think that,
Mhm.
like we talked about this earlier, that's why Superman is the American superhero because though we love Batman and we pretend we could be Batman, you wouldn't want to be him because you don't get to go out in the daytime and be your true self. Um,
Mhm.
Superman
Mhm.
still gets to like he's putting on a show still, so maybe it's not his true self. But where is his true self? It's probably somewhere between Clark
Yeah,
Kent and Superman,
for sure.
where the true
For
self
sure.
of Batman is just Batman wearing a mask.
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, this, boy, we probably would need an entire different episode on
Yeah.
exploring, even like a defining masculinity, femininity, epistemology of
Hmm.
of how do we discern what that means. I would say, like, to give some brief commentary that might not satisfy anybody at all, but would give some sort of response to what you're saying, is I would say there's I'm kind of like in C.S. Lewis's camp on this. I see there being like the masculine and the feminine as archetypes. You actually see
Yeah.
that in the Ransom trilogy or the Space
Sure.
trilogy that
Big time.
seeks embodied expression. Um, to me, the question of masculinity is the question. One of the questions is, you have been in, you have been, for the most part, statistically, you have been endowed with greater physical strength. How do you use that strength? Is it in service of protection of the weak? Is it in service of protection of women who, again, on average, not across? I mean, Ronda Rousey would just kill me. But on average, how would you use your strength? Are you going to use your strength in service and protection of the weak and the vulnerable, which is a virtue of Superman? It's in some ways you could almost, to steal some theological language, it's a bit of kenosis. It is the Christ hymn of Philippians. It is the descent of the capacity of God, strength, abilities, which could be used for oppression and power. It could be used in the particular way, but instead the strength, this is like an Obi-Wan quote from the Clone Wars. I know you'll get on board with this.
That's right.
He has this exchange with Maul on Mandalore, right? You know that scene?
Yep, of course.
You can kill me, but you will never destroy me. It takes strength to resist the dark side. Only the weak embrace it.
And he tells Maul, you think that it takes strength. I'm butchering the quote now. You think that it takes strength to wield the dark side, but you're giving in to your passions. You're giving in to your vices. This is a massive paraphrase, but it takes more strength to wield the light. It takes more strength to resist vice, to resist the appetites of our lesser angels. Resist that, and to actually choose the good. It takes more strength to do that. And so I would be hopeful that we would get a presentation of Superman that would be in a world that is still very suspicious that power is synonymous with malevolence, that we would be able to see somehow that power, self-restrained towards virtue, is the aspirational goal. It's a moral exemplar that we would want to follow in our own lives. To me, that would be a masculine presentation of heroism.
Yeah. No, that sounds so good. I have to mention this C.S. Lewis quote because you brought him into it. It's in his essay on chivalry, and he's talking about knights and chivalrous knights, and he's like, these are men who can still go to a ballroom and have a fancy dance with a woman, even after growing accustomed to smashed faces, like on the battlefield. And you're like, holy crap, dude, that is amazing. Not like that it's a good thing but it's like you've done these things, and it's not destroyed you. You can still handle those things. Like you haven't let evil destroy you. I think that's part of it.
Do you know Chris Green at all?
I don't think so.
Pentecostal. He was, actually don't know what he's in now. He was in my early years a Pentecostal theologian I really looked to. He still does brilliant writing, and now I can't remember what specific stream in the Christian tradition he's more associating with now. But he talks about the archetypal cowboy as actually, if we actually follow the story, it's a tragic story. So you think about that picture of masculinity where someone has to use their strength in defense of the vulnerable. But he's like, I'm again paraphrasing here a little bit, there is a dangerous dark side to the cowboy figure, even the white hat cowboy. He's like, if you follow the pattern of the stories, you notice that the cowboy never gets to participate fully in the community that he's given his life to protect and preserve. He's always pushed out on the outskirts. And he's like, King David is a great example of this. King David is a man who Saul has slain his thousands and David has slain his 10,000s. And so when David wants to go build a temple, a house for God, what does God say? Great thought, David, but you've got too much blood on your hands. So David never quite enters in. And so, I think Chris Green represents an idea of a kind of a nuanced picture of like masculine heroes. Chris Green, he brings up, we have fallen so in love with the cowboy story and thinking that the myth of redemptive violence, that violence is always the solution to every problem that ails the world, that we miss out on the tragedy of the cowboy's own story,
Mhm.
and that he oftentimes never finds true love. This is Wolverine's story, right? Wolverine is like the perfect archetypal cowboy figure, right? He's always on the outskirts of community. He's never quite in. Once he gets in and gets close to somebody, they die because Sabretooth shows up and he kills this girl, or
Yeah.
that's his. It's a tragic story of a hero that may be doing some sort of necessary evil in this evil age, but we shouldn't look at him as the ultimate archetype, right? He isn't. So Superman's deficiency for me as a Christian is, while he embodies in many ways some of the virtues of Christ, I don't think that's the ultimate solution for the salvation of the world, is that we beat Darkseid to a bloody pulp.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I say that with humility, not necessarily saying that I have the answer to that one all figured out.
Yeah. Well, so you refreshed my memory here. So right now we have Dune, this Dune revival, and I absolutely love Dune. But Frank Herbert had this different view on power than maybe like a Tolkien did. I think Tolkien pretty straightforwardly thought absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's a ring and it will corrupt anyone, and to various degrees based on your own inclinations, but it's going to get you. And so what do you do with power? Well, you throw it away, especially if it's this absolute power. And maybe not all of it, because there is like the right rule of the king, and he was a Roman Catholic, right? And so there is maybe that. But definitely with like absolute power, that needs to go. And he had, he said, he maybe tended towards anarchy or something like that. I know people like blow that up too much. So then Frank Herbert is like, nah, it's probably not power that's corrupting. It's probably the corrupt are the ones who are seeking power. And so another kind of like cynical take on people and power. And he tries to show that with Paul Atreides, and he fails because everyone loves Paul Atreides. He's like, no, you don't get it. He's like a Hitlerian figure. And you're like, no, he's not. And so then he has to write Dune Messiah, and he kind of botched it again. And then he didn't get it right until God Emperor of Dune, but that's fine. But so then you have Superman, and that is ultimate power. And so I'm wondering what they're going to do with that in this metamodern sense, because we have a revival of Dune, and I don't know, maybe people aren't understanding the message of Dune. I totally understand if they don't, because Frank Herbert tried and failed at the message he wanted to get out there. It's a great story, but he like failed up, I guess. But Superman has all the power in the world, and I don't know what our culture I don't know how we feel about power right now. I'm not sure. Do we think that that power should be destroyed and thrown away, like the ring, the one like absolute power, or do we think that power can be in the hands of the ones who deserve it? Like,
yes.
What do you think?
I think the answer to that is the second one. I think we've lived long enough with the critique of Superman that you also see in these stories, whether you go back to, this one here, whether you go back to the original Death of Superman story, you see these other iterations. You could think of Kingdom Come. Obviously, he doesn't die in Kingdom Come. He retires, but there's a pattern here that also plays out over and over again. Is that in the Death of Superman, we may think that power is potential, and its potential corruption needs to be destroyed, but in the vacuum of power, something far worse always emerges. And you see that with the reign of the Superman. You see it in Kingdom Come with, what's his name? Magog, who kind of steps in to the vacuum of power. You saw it in even the Snyderverse. I wish in some ways we could have just seen like what Zack Snyder just wanted to do without any interference. And it probably would have been better as like an extended Netflix series than movies.
Yeah, totally.
But it was really clear. He was telling the story from my vantage point. I mean, one of my most watched videos is on Batman v Superman, and what it means is that he was trying to tell a story of this Messiah figure that is no longer, we can no longer trust. The false god, the spray painting of false god on Superman's statue. And this heroic Messiah figure ultimately dies, fighting something that appears to be far worse. But in that absence of power, it's interesting in that his version of the Justice League, I don't remember what like the Joss Whedon one even was about. I tried to scrub that from memory.
I try to forget
but
that
in
one.
his
Yeah.
version of the Justice League, as soon as the cries of Superman's death goes out, it awakens the mother boxes, which instantly send a signal, to Apocalypse that there's a vacuum of power here. And what rushes to fill that vacuum is far worse. I think that is, and people that don't care about comic books at all, or maybe let me wake you up here. That is the thing we've seen in our own culture right now. We've seen it even with the likes of a Richard Dawkins, who, for years was following under this strange secular progressive eschatology that said all we have to do is when we remove religion, just some like weird modernist category that they misunderstand. If we remove religion, we will eventually, through a pursuit of pure reason, will reach this ultimate utopia. It's John Lennon's song, Imagine.
Yeah, Imagine. Mm-hmm.
That's this idea that Dawkins had. And then it's so funny to see like, rise of new atheism, post 9/11, world. Religion's evil because look at what religion did on September 11th, as if it was all just one category. And so we have all these critiques of religion. All we need is this pure, secular, religiously neutral space. And now see what they're all complaining about. It's the rise of woke religion with air quotes around it, scare quotes even, And so now they're all lamenting, oh, it's been the death of science because now we have woke science and all of this stuff. It's like, guys, you don't realize humans are fundamentally a spiritual species. We are religious by nature. And so we better hope that the thing that we assign highest value to can carry the burden of being virtuous.